Hey bros, tudo tranks com vocês? Eu espero que sim. Aqui quem fala com vocês é o lendário Zé Ficha. E galera, vamos para mais um vídeo aqui de Chrono Odyssey, né? Que é esse J-Audit, né? Falou ali, ó, Chrono Odyssey. Não, não vai escapar das alegações. Vamos ver aqui.
Chrono Odyssey is not escaping the allegations that it is effectively New World from Temu, and to be honest, it's getting a little bit more serious than that. Let's jump in, let's talk about it. So what happened is there was a recent closed beta test.
Cara, eu não sei que. Vamos ver o que ele vai querer dizer aí. Mas pode ser por causa de alguns assets ou coisas do tipo que se parece. Cara, quem acompanha aqui sabe, eu falei lá. Isso aqui é um New World, velho. É um New World. É, antes da gente estar jogando, vendo os trailers, algumas coisas, dava pra perceber já. Mas, enfim.
For Chrono Odyssey, and in that test you were supposed to stick within one region of the map. At the edge of the maps there was this wall that was initially invisible, but when you get close up to it you realise you can't pass through and it turns blue. But some cunning players found a way through. The way through was basically just to die and make sure your body fell through the other side, log out, and then you would basically spawn at a nearby town that you weren't supposed to be able to get to. I had a very brief moment to do this morning and I never really managed to explore a lot. But some people managed to do it last night, and they explored an awful lot more.
Essa cidade é
What's the problem
nova.
here? Everything about this sort of sounds cool. You get to
Deixa eu ver aqui. Mano, já dá pra ver que é um vilarejo bem pequeno, assim, saca? Não é. Tipo. Isso é uma coisa que eu acho que tá fudendo talvez um pouquinho os MMOs hoje em dia, assim. Ah, não sei. É de 2020, né? Até 2030 que eu gosto de tratar isso. Pô, as cidades não são grandes, cara. Eu não sei, tipo assim, se é bom ou ruim, porque é bom que, como é pequena, né? Você consegue ir nas localidades mais rápido, certo? Mas é ruim que talvez você perde um pouco a imersão, eu acho, talvez, sei lá. Parece só um vilarejo.
To explore a lot, but some people managed to do it last night and they explored an awful lot more. Now, what's the problem here? Everything about this sort of sounds cool. You get a little sneak peek at what's coming. All sounded good, mostly looks good. The issue arises when you go to specific points on the map that have a very similar resemblance to what you might find in New World. And if I'm honest, that is completely understating it. In the game, and I've actually seen two different examples of the same kind of thing, there are some buildings that are incredibly similar. And when I say incredibly similar, I'd say like 99% similar to what you might find in New World when we're talking about the forts. The forts are where the walls would be.
Não é mesmo, cara. Caraca, os fortes de New World igual. Igual. Até. Ah, velho, até essas paradinhas ali cara, que é tipo uma vendinha ali, velho.
Fort. You can capture them in the open world or you can do the 50v50 wars. And near those forts is also what we called the war camp. Just a little tent where you sort of prep to siege.
Eu já participei dessa guerra. É a mesma coisa.
Very spookily similar. Now, I would not go so far as to say that they actually copied the models. You can kind of see that there are differences in terms of the 3D models themselves. So it's not literally just copy and pasted and stolen. What they have done is basically systematically replicate the fort, and they've done it very accurately.
Olha ali, ó. Olha ali, cara.
Systematically replicate the fort, and they've done it very accurately. A lot of the passageways are the same, the stairs are the same, the ways up to the top of the fort are the same. I'd give it a very like 99%
mesma coisa, velho, a mesma
coisa, now, there are some obvious changes, like it's not exactly the same, but you can very, very clearly tell the inspiration. There is no denying that inspiration. As a New World Andy, anybody who's played New World and done the forts instantly will recognize that. In my opinion, there's no point trying to sugarcoat this. Somebody somewhere is dealing.
Cara, é aquela coisa. O jogo, ele tá muito inspirado ali, talvez, New World, né? E é aquela coisa. Ele não vai ser de graça. até então é o que todo mundo também especula que ele não vai ser de graça, certo? Ah, pensando numa visão talvez marketing empresarial, algo do tipo, o New World ele tá mal das pernas, certo? Ele tá mal das pernas. E a única forma do New World, eu acho que hoje em dia, dele voltar, é ele ficando free. Se o New World ele abre as pernas ali e fala, pô, vai ser de graça, saca? Ele já vai ganhar um público muito grande. Eu tenho certeza disso. E sabendo disso, pode ser que foi essa estratégia da galera Cara, é que eu tô tentando pensar de uma maneira meio que empresarial e marqueteira para fazer as coisas talvez darem certo, tá? Ia fazer, eu acho que isso, cara. Eu realmente ia dar uma versão pra galera meia bomba, porque o jogo, querendo ou não, ele é idêntico ao New World ali, né? Mas só que com algumas melhorias. Melhorias que eu falo não é de gráfico, desempenho não, que a gente sabe como que tava, né? Pô, na verdade, desempenho, né? O gráfico pode até ser melhor mesmo. Mas é na questão de mecânicas, né? Mecânicas muito mais apuradas, muito mais legais. E assim que esse jogo meio que lançar algo do tipo, o New World pode falar, ah, ok, tamo de graça. Aí a galera vai migrar, que talvez ele já quer pegar o público do New World, pô, a galera vai ir mais gente para o New World, talvez do que ir pro Chrono Odyssey, que vai ser comprado, saca? Então eu penso assim, no próximo beta, eles têm que entregar algo fidedigno, né, ao que eles mostraram e de maneira coerente e já meter lá com uma pré-venda, saca? Pra galera já ir comprar. É, e, porra, e, e aí o New World que se vire, saca? Sei lá, pensamento meu aqui, vamos ver.
Deliberately, intentionally tried to replicate a New World vault. And actually, on one of them, if you went to the middle, you can go ahead and buy the territory for your guild, and it had like a cost of like 20,000 gold. And that's effectively the exact same thing that happens in New World. The screen looks the same, the tax information looks the same, everything basically looks the same. Now, let's be clear, I do not believe there's any legal ramifications here. The idea of having a fort and the layout and such is not, I don't think, like copyrightable, trademarkable, whichever one it is. Unless Amazon has actually like put in a patent and has the legal rights to that, which I very much doubt they do, then not Nintendo and this isn't Power World, then nothing is going to come of this like from a legal point of view, I would guess, because I don't think they necessarily have a legal leg to stand on. And nothing seems to have been directly lifted. That just doesn't seem to be the case. Combine that with the fact that the public wasn't supposed to see this, you've had to like sort of cheese your way beyond the barrier and find something you weren't supposed to. I really doubt anything will come of this. Now, there's a couple of key points here. Apparently, Canon was DM'd on his stream, and they've been told that this will not be in any of the future builds. And in fact, the build that everybody's talking about, the Jesus patch, it already isn't in that. But it's already been removed before anybody kicked off about it. And you know what? I sort of believe that, and we're going to go with that being true. Although technically, they could have been like, oh no, we're definitely removing that. But I think here,
Pô, os caras foram lá na DM dele e falaram isso, que nada disso, velho.
that's probably the case, and I'll get onto why in a moment. Now, on some levels, there's no denying what has happened. There's no explanation, right? It's just a straight up rip off of New World. However, I'm going to defend it just a little bit, so please bear with me. First, as I said, you weren't supposed to see this. Secondly, I don't necessarily think it's completely crazy when you're starting a game to have an
Olha,
inspiration
New
for
World
that
purinho,
game.
velho.
And it's quite
Mano, New World purinho. Isso aqui, cara.
clear that the inspiration for Chrono Odyssey at some point has been New World. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. The gathering is very similar, and you know, the actual colors of the trees and all that kind of stuff seems to follow a very similar pattern. Everything's sort of similar, right? So I think from a layperson's point of view, what they've probably done is initially they started making New World and they were going to try and improve on New World, which, let's be honest, at this point they've probably not fully succeeded on. And then what they've done is during that, they thought, okay, we're going to have the same
Uhum.
kind of system that New World is going to have. We're going to have these territories that you can claim. Maybe you can fight over. Let's knock something up and let's give it a bash and see if we like
Uhum.
it or we don't like it. And during that process, they thought, well, we might as well just stick with the plan and make the fort. The forts that we're looking at are the ones from New World. Somebody somewhere has just decided to use that as the template and use that as the one that they were going to go in that version. I don't know if it goes beyond that. I highly doubt that they were going to release it looking that similar to New World. Surely someone along the lines in the testing would have said, hey, don't do this. And if they actually
Exatamente, velho.
wanted to go ahead with that system, which I don't think they are, by the way, but if they did, I'm pretty sure they would have redone the models. Now, I'm not going to defend whether or not they should or shouldn't have used this as a base to prototype, and I'm not even 100% sure it was a prototype. Maybe they actually were planning on this at some point launching exactly in that state. Personally, don't think it's that crazy to use a different game as a base. We've seen similar games exist in the past, like League of Legends and Dota, TFT, and whatever the auto chess
Sim,
game
sim,
was,
sim.
Valorant and Counter-Strike and
Uhum.
Overwatch and all this
Mas,
kind of stuff, right? There are games that
mas no MMORPG, vou analisar todo MMORPG meio que é diferente um do outro, né? Pô, você tem os conceitos básicos de MMORPG, mas acho que eu não consigo lembrar, talvez, um que seja meio que parecido com o outro mesmo, assim, saca? Pô, tenta me fazer lembrar aí um que realmente um é parecido com o outro, porque é isso que a gente tá olhando aqui. O Chrono Odyssey é realmente muito parecido com o New World. Tanto que, assim, ó, os MMORPGs antigos, o que era mais parecido entre eles eram combates, eram os combates. Tanto que os que tinham combates diferenciais, como era o Cabal Online, né, sobressaíam, né, pro meu gosto, para alguns outros gostos. E esse é o contrário, né? E nesse jogo é o contrário. É toda a estrutura que é parecida, saca? Combate é um tanto quanto diferente. Um tanto quanto só, né? Porque você troca de arma também, sabe? E tal. Mas é meio
get
bizarro
made that are
pensar
very
isso, né?
similar to other games, and you can quite clearly see the inspiration. Whether or not they've ever crossed this line of having something so similar, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if that's a common thing that happens in gaming where they just utilize somebody else's like inspiration and then we'll change it later. For me, a bigger question is at some point someone along the lines at that studio thought that they were going to have this system. They were literally going to take some of New World's worst parts and try and put them in their game. And only now does it seem like they've decided, actually, let's not have that system at all. Now, why am I so confident it's not in the game? One, Canon apparently was DM'd that it's been removed. And two, it's quite clear from all the communications, all the videos, that 17-minute video that they did, when they're talking about content, they're not having
Uhum.
mass PvP, they're not mentioning this system, so it obviously to me doesn't seem to exist anymore, and it probably hasn't been planned for some time. Everybody's just going to look at this and go, "Ooh, yikes, that's a yikers right there." It is pretty much almost a direct rip off. It's not literally copy and paste the models, so I
Uhum.
don't think there's any like legal ramifications there, but it's as close to it as you could possibly do without doing that. The layout is pretty much identical. If you're a new
Pô, cara, porque é foda, mano, você pensar nisso, porque realmente não faz sentido, cara. Eu quero ver uma coisa aqui. Eu pausei o vídeo dele aqui e vamos lá na página oficial do Chrono Odyssey. Eu quero, eu quero ver uma coisa aqui, porque eu tenho que ver agora, ah, porque eu simplesmente eu posso esquecer, né? Acho que aqui, não é aqui ainda não, cara. Nossa, mano. Meu Deus do céu, velho. Ah, Oi, channel. Caralho, velho. Nossa, que dificuldade agora, hein, pra achar a parada deles. Esse aqui, ó, cadê? Acho que esse aqui, ó. Quero ver uma coisa aqui, velho. Tudo bem que foi de... É, é isso aqui, ó. É isso aqui. Saca? Você consegue perceber ali, olha. Você consegue perceber que é realmente meio que uma cidade. Saca? Você consegue ver que é a porra de uma cidade, velho. E a gente não teve nenhuma cidade no game. Nenhuma cidade, velho. A gente teve outpostos lá, velho. Tem uma outra cena que acho dele é meio que andando na cidade, velho. A gente vai rever esse trailer aqui depois com mais calma, cara. Putz, será que era no primeiro trailer? Acho que era no primeiro trailer. Depois a gente revê isso aqui. Vamos continuar vendo.
World, Andy. It's so spooky. On my stream today, I literally went into New World, went into the same places and like alt tab between the two, and it's crazy how close it is. I think on some level there's like an ethical question whether or not they should have used that as the base. I don't know why they couldn't have just made their own fort. If I am correct that they just used it to prototype this game mode, then why couldn't they just design it a little bit differently? It wouldn't have been that much work, I don't think. I guess using an existing piece of like modeling probably a little bit easier in the design aesthetic, but I honestly can't see why they couldn't have just bodged together something completely different that looked completely different, so there would never have been any similarity whatsoever. I really can't imagine that taking much longer. A lot of people are going to look at it though and just simply say, well, if the models are like this, is this something that we want to support? Is this something that, you know, further down the line maybe they will add pay to win, because we're seeing some shady behavior. You know, we've got all that M pixel thing with the CEO is the same CEO of both, but apparently there's no connection. They're promising no pay to win, but Kakao's got a history with adding pay to win, and now they're like ripping off very obvious parts from New World. Yeah, I think that's going to cause a lot of like dubious thoughts in people's heads, considering the fact that the beta also hasn't necessarily been well received. Although I think a lot of the criticism for the beta is a little bit over egged, like I think it's a little bit over exaggerated. But there are some very strong things that they need to fix and change and all that kind of stuff. But on this one, I think it's just going to be a yikers. For me, I'm not really too bothered by it, right? Because you weren't supposed to see it. It wasn't supposed to be in the game. Nobody was supposed to know. The outside of that starting zone is obviously not finished. Is it a little bit immoral? Yes. Is it the worst thing I've ever seen in gaming? No. Is it a slight worry that they decided to try and copy New World? Yes, on some levels, absolutely. Although, for me personally, being a New World Andy, if you literally could make New World and you could improve it, then that would be great for me. And maybe that's what they started off with the premise of being. Like, let's make New World. It sold a shed ton of copies, but then instead of like doing all the bad things, we'll just do positive things. And right now, they're
Cara,
kind of...
pior que é mesmo, mano. Será que talvez esse é o pensamento dos caras, velho? Não deles, não sei, porque eles mudaram, né, cara, a estrutura do game que era antes. Mas era. Pô, vendeu. Ah, mano, se foi isso.
failing right now. It is
Se
basically
fuder,
New
velho.
World from Timu, but as Bay said, he's hoping that it will feel more like a Tesla. Except unlike Teslas, let's hope it doesn't crash and burn. So for me, I'm not like personally offended by this one. Like, I get why they would possibly do it. I guess it would possibly be prototyped. I guess it would be tested. The first iteration of the game probably was very, very similar to New World, and then they're moving away from that. If it ever made it into the launch of the game, I would feel completely different. I would be like almost borderline angry about it. But a version that they tested that you're not supposed to see, that's already been removed, I'm not going to get too worked up about it. But they're definitely not escaping these allegations. It is very, very similar to New World. Let's hope they can make a better version, right? Let's hope they can actually pull it together. Because if they don't, Timu New World is not going to go down well. I'm personally kind of optimistic. Like, I don't think these are necessarily the end of the world. It's a shame that people have seen this. I think if people hadn't managed to get behind the wall, nobody would ever know that they did it. And a bit of me kind of wonders how many other games have done this. We've seen like Marathon and other games where art has snuck through the cracks and they've used things that they shouldn't have done. Maybe this is just a case of that, right? They did it as a test and then they never did it. Or maybe they were actually going to launch it like that forget morals, we're just going to absolutely rip it and try and do it better. Maybe that's what they were going to do. There's no real way I can know that intention. We're going to keep note of this one for sure. I think a lot of people are just going to go, lols, it's the same, can't believe it, Temu New World. And then other people are going to say, well, it doesn't really matter, right? Because it's not going to be in the game, so I'm not going to stress too much about it. Let's hope the actual final product of the game is good. And yes, the game does need work. Obviously, Chrono Odyssey needs work. The movement, the animations, the lighting, and the graphics all need some serious work. And an FOV zoom slider, please, because like the zoom is making a lot of people sick. There's big reasons to criticize it. I think this is just going to get added to the let's pile on the game kind of thing, which isn't necessarily unfair, except maybe it is because you're supposed to see it. I don't know. I'm a little bit torn. Let me know your thoughts. I must be subscribe. Goodbye.
Valeu. Valeu.